Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you back to the Manifestation Podcast. I'm Peggy McColl, and I'm here with my very special guest and a member of the Dynamic Destinies Inc. team, Eric Webb. Eric, thank you so much for being here today. It's so great to have you.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, this is fun. You know, we had a team meeting on Monday and we were talking about our manifestation podcast. And of course, every time we get together, we strategize on how will we serve the world in better and greater and grander ways, because I believe that's why we're put here on the planet. And so this week we decided to talk about focus. And in our discussion, Eric and I had discussed a movie that we both watched many years ago. It was actually made in 1999. And it was a movie with Kevin Costner and Kelly Preston. And it's a movie called For Love of the Game. And it was based on a novel, as far as I understand. And Kevin Costner plays a professional baseball player, a pitcher, in fact. And Eric, you have some history in the baseball area. So why don't you tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about that?
Yes, so I grew up playing hockey and baseball, and at about 14, I decided to pursue baseball full time, playing at the provincial level, and then moved all the way up and was lucky enough to play college baseball with the University of Calgary. And yeah, I've been very fortunate with my baseball career, and along the way, there's been a lot of big life lessons that I've been able to take away from the game, and focus has been one of those big, big lessons too. So.
Yeah, it's true. You know, I love that you said there's so many life lessons, because it's true. And whether you're playing sports, which I absolutely recommend, or whether you're watching them, we can get those life lessons, right? It's definitely one of the benefits. Which position did you play?
I was a second baseman.
Second baseman. That's a pretty busy spot.
What's that, sorry?
That's a busy spot.
It is, yes. I was originally a shortstop, but actually when I was 16, I had my right shoulder reconstructed, and then after that, that was too far of a throw for me. So second base is where I played my college baseball.
Right on. So was it a sports injury that caused you to have your shoulder reconstructed?
It was, yeah. When I was 15, I actually dove for a ground ball, and when I landed, my arm popped out, twisted, ripped up my labrum. And so when I was 16, I had that all fixed, and it was about a year before I got back on the field. And that was a crucial year, because that was going into my grade 12 year. That's when you start getting scouted for universities, and that's when they start offering scholarships and stuff like that. So at the time, it was tough. I had all my scholarships taken away. And it was a year of rehab before I could even get back on the field. So when we talk about focus, that was a huge year, because my only goal was to get back on the field and to play at a competitive level again. And
yeah,
wow. So it was a big year, and fortunate to have healed it up and continued on with my career.
Right on. I'm so glad. I'm happy to hear that. You know, we've seen so many movies, countless movies, documentaries about people who had injuries and were told your career's done, like you're never gonna play again. Did anyone say that to you?
Yeah, it was quite a substantial injury. So on top of that, the tear in the labrum, I actually had cracked my humerus bone.
Oh boy.
And the only way to fix the crack was to put a screw in, but my surgeon said if we do that, you're not throwing a baseball again. So I might still have a crack in my humerus bone. I'm not too sure, but nothing was going to stop me from playing ball. So
I love that, like single-minded purpose, as we hear from Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich. It's so true. Like as you're saying that story, I think about the 1980s, and I read Louise Hay's book, and she tells the story of how she had been diagnosed with cancer. And the doctors had told her, well, you have to go in and have this surgery. And I think they wanted to remove all kinds of body parts, like female body parts. And she's like, no. And she refused the surgery. And the doctors had told her, like, if you don't, like, you're not going to make it. This is serious stuff here. But she just said no, and she just refused. And that's when she got into the work that she was doing with holistic healing and using your mind to heal and things like that. Now, did you have any exposure to any of those kinds of materials when you were a teenager and you were going through this experience?
So the first, I guess my first personal development book, I guess you could call it, it was called The Mental Keys to Baseball.
Oh,
And so growing up playing on the teams I did, we were lucky enough to have high performance coaches, mindset coaches come in. So that's where I really was introduced to visualization and the power of your mind and thinking. And at the time, I really only applied it to baseball, and that was my only passion, and that's all I wanted to do. And but yeah, that year that I got injured, it's where I started to really look at my mindset and start to develop that, because along with that, there was some stuff in my personal life that had gone on, and it was all like a clump and of a year of really growing and so yeah, that's when I started to really dive into that, and the mindset is huge in baseball, right?
It's huge in anything. I really think it's huge in life. It's huge in relationships. It's huge in our fitness and our health and sports and money issues. It sure is. Now, prior to that, that's wonderful that you had exposure to all that being in baseball. What a great gift that was. Were you raised in an environment that was really positive and supportive?
Very supportive family. I owe everything to my parents. They're very supportive.
Nice.
But in terms of mindset, I wouldn't say it's always been the most positive. It's something that I feel that I had a bit of a natural ability to keep level-minded or level-headed and really focus on the positivity and not let the negativity that was going on in various parts of my life growing up really affect anything. It was really being able to dial it in when I needed to and to make sure that I kept my mindset right. And it's funny because I didn't really dive into the whole personal development scene until after university.
Oh, really?
Yeah, after I finished university, I started working for sales at a Good Life Fitness, actually, just a club in Canada, and started in sales, worked my way up to management, and I was lucky in that office. My manager, he's big into personal development, so he's always giving me these books to read, and that was where I really jumped in, and it was awesome to start reading this material because it kind of explained how my mind worked to me.
Right.
Celine calls me an unconscious competence, so it was nice and I really dove into that material, and then and that's been the past 4 or 5 years been really studying it. And
amazing.
Yeah.
And did you meet Patch, the founder of Good Life Fitness?
I did, yeah. He came in to do some sales training at one point. And
well, he was a client of mine. Did you know that?
I did not know that Patch was a client of yours. That's very cool. He's got such a cool story.
Oh, yeah. And I wrote the foreword for one of his books.
Living the Good Life?
No, it was another one. Or was it? I can't remember the title. It was so long ago. So he was a private mentoring client of mine. Like, I drove down to London. I worked with him there to help him work on the book. And then I was asked afterwards, but I really got to know him and like him. He's such a great guy and such a wonderful, healthy mindset and philosophy. And I love, the culture of the Good Life Fitness as well, because it's a very, very positive environment. I actually had registered, before I had met him, I'd registered a domain name. And as you know, I'm a domain name aholic. And I registered theultimatepatch.com, which was based on an idea that I had of creating a placebo. That would be like a patch that people could put on their bodies that said faith, and that would inject faith like a nitroglycerin patch would. My father used to wear a nitroglycerin patch for his heart.
Right.
And so he used to put this patch on, and I remember saying to him one time, how do you know if there's really nitroglycerin in there or not? And he goes, well, just touch it. Just touch the patch and you'll feel it, because it starts to, give you a little bit of a shock. And actually it had fallen off one time, his patch, and I picked it up on the floor, and it was like, I felt this tingling in my fingers because of the nitro glycerin. So yeah, it was kind of, anyway, so I had registered the Ultimate Patch thinking I'm going to create this product. I'm going to bring it out one day. And Patch heard about it. He's like, oh, I love that idea. I really want to do that. And of course, he loved the domain name as well, being, because he calls himself Patch.
Yeah.
So David.
That's very cool. I didn't know that, Peggy.
Yeah, so many things that are going to come out of this. So back to focus. So I love that you learned that at such a young age. It's so valuable. And as you know, in my own story, I was 19 when I first started studying this, but I was one messed up girl before I got into the materials. And in high school, I was a cheerleader, so I was involved in football. Always liked sports, but never really played it, and was never encouraged as a kid to play it. But I think there's so many valuable things, so many valuable lessons that you can get out of that. So let's go back to For Love of the Game and Kevin Costner. And of course, the movie, there's a scene in there where he's playing against the New York Yankees. I think it's the Yankees he's playing, right?
That would be.
I like their uniforms. I like the Yankees uniforms. And he's playing for the Detroit Tigers, and he's the pitcher. And I like it. There's a scene where he says, when Kevin Costner says, you can tell you're in New York, because they're yelling at him, you suck, you suck, Billy Chapel. And of course, what he does is that he's on the mound and he's getting ready to pitch. And of course, when you're there, when you're on the field, you're in the zone, or you should be in the zone, and not distracted from what's going on in the world. Of course, right now we've got COVID. So any sports teams, professional sports teams, like we're in the NHL playoffs right now that are playing, there's nobody in the stands. And, I've talked to my husband. I said, I wonder how the players feel about that. Has anyone done an interview with them? Because I think they're doing a really good job at keeping the energy in the stadium or where they're playing. So in this one scene, Kevin Costner is getting ready to pitch, and there's people are screaming at him. And of course, he's the opposing team, so not the favorite. And he does this thing where he just zones out everything, like just everything that's around him. Like it gets quiet in his mind. Mm-hmm. And it's like my favorite scene, because it really speaks to what Neville Goddard suggests in The Power of Awareness, and Neville's other work, is that you've got to deny the evidence of the senses. Now, a little bit different than that, but in this particular case, he's denying anything else that's going on around him, and he's just focused on, getting that ball across the plate without the swinger hitting it, or without the batter hitting it, the swinger. Without the batter hitting it, which is so cool when he does it, because, I was thinking about it as a pitcher, he's, and when he strikes out a player, he's pissing them off, right? He's getting them all angry. And I was thinking that you have to spin that in your mind as a positive thing, mm-hmm. right? Because I think if someone was sensitive and they're constantly having people getting mad at them, then they may feel impacted by that if they choose to, but he doesn't let it bother him. And, like even when you remember that scene where one of his friends went up to the plate, and they show a scene where he'd been helping this guy and his wife move. Yeah. And I forget what his friend's name was in the movie, but his friend's now playing for the Yankees. And so he's pitching, they're playing against each other, and his friend smiles at him. And his friend smiles at him to try and distract him, to try and turn him off. But on the mound, you can hear Kevin Costner saying, "Don't smile at me." Like he's having a dialogue with the person at bat. Yeah. And I just found it all, like the dynamics of what was going on the field, so fascinating, and how it was happening, and just seemed like what was happening on the field, people in the stands really don't have any idea of all of that, the intricate details of what's going on.
No, there's a ton of nuances, and you talk about the possible distractions, right? So you have the crowd noise, especially if you're playing an opposing stadium. They'll say anything and everything to try and throw you off your game. Now in the movie, Kevin Costner's character, he's doing something extremely rare, which is chasing a perfect game.
Yes.
Right? Meaning there's 9 innings.
No runs.
Exactly. No hits, no runs, no one reaches base. And it's a very rare thing that it's a dream for all pitchers, right? And he's got the crowd noise. And baseball, again, we talked about how it's such a mental sport. It's the voices in his head as well. Like,
true,
if his friend comes up, like you have the voices, the external voices, and then the voices in your head that you really have to be mindful of. And it's just like in life, right? It's
yes.
And that's baseball's. You have to be confident when you play, right? If you have everyone calling you names and all that, and in your own head you're like, even as a hitter, this guy's throwing hard. Am I going to hit it? If you have that doubt or any negativity, if you let your mind go there, your results on the field aren't going to be
great
favor, right? So
yeah,
it's going back to what you're saying is the ability to quiet your mind.
Yeah,
is huge, and that's for everything. But.
And I think it's something that you can learn, something that you could practice. Of course, I suspect, I know Kevin Costner's playing a role in a movie or whatever, but even in real life, like learning to create a greater level of focus. We just wrapped up one of our Q&A calls for our program, A Million in a Month. And one of our lovely participants, who's a lady that, we've grown to know and love, she was talking about goals. And she was saying, should I set a short-term goal or should I just go for the goal that I really want? And she was reading the demand principle at the same time. So she says, should my demand be what I'd really love, or should my demand be what I think I can do? Now that's an interesting question, because what that says is this is her paradigm. She thinks she can do this amount. That's what her paradigm believes. But I said to her, what would you love? And then it's the other number, it's the larger number, it's the real goal that she's going for. And I said to her, you got to live as if it's happening right now. And that's another thing that Neville Goddard says. He says that the reason why people do not accomplish their goals is because they don't feel it naturally. You have to feel it naturally. And that was another thing I noticed about For the Love of the Game, is that Kevin Costner, although he's playing Billy Chapel in the movie, he played a role so well that it looked like he belonged there. Like there was no question in his mind, and that he was, one of the world's best pitchers, if not the world's best pitcher. And of course, in the movie, he's faced with final game, perfect game, as you said, a ball player, pitcher's biggest dream. And he's going to go out on a big high. And you know what I loved about that, the last part of that movie, is all of the fans got into it because they knew what he was attempting to accomplish. But what they didn't know is Billy Chapel standing on the mound in excruciating pain. Was it his shoulder or his elbow? I think maybe both. I don't know.
His pitching arm there, but.
Yeah. And so, do you remember when he's talking to God and he's basically saying, if you could just give me the next, I don't know what he asked for. Was it 20 minutes of no pain? But he managed to do it. And I think it also speaks to the fact that we're so powerful and we have no idea of what we're capable of doing, because people were trying, even the night before, I think they were getting on the plane, and his catcher was saying to him, are you wincing? Are you hurting? Like, you need to step out. There's no what's the word? Disgrace in just saying you're injured.
Yeah.
If you're injured. but he didn't want to not play. For him,
It's such a tough thing to, that's the competitor, right? Is the mindset of an athlete can, they can be in a ton of pain and they'll play through it.
right.
Both to the extremes, and which can be detrimental physically, but that their mindset's so strong and their willpower to see their goal or the game or whatever it come to fruition and see it through is greater than any physical pain.
I absolutely agree. And you know what it reminds me of, Eric? I think about Bob Proctor and how Bob Proctor said, a professional is at their best regardless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's a perfect example of everything we talked about, right? So
He is like I've heard Bob say that he's been on stage. I've seen him on stage, sitting in the front row. We've done seminars together where he's wincing in pain. And he's, had the excruciating pain up his back or whatever. And he goes on. And I know from being with him either in the green room before he goes on or having breakfast with him or hearing him say, what's happening for him. And yet, bam, he gets on the stage and it's like, he steps into that persona of this professional who's going to deliver. And I've had experiences like that before. As a matter of fact, here's an example of an experience where I had that. It was 12 years ago, and my mother had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, so we knew she was going to be passing on, and we had done a number of things with her that had been on her bucket list. And about 8 weeks before she actually passed on, she ended up in palliative care. And when she went into palliative care, they thought she was going to be gone like within a couple days. And then another week went by and another week, and she was just like really hanging on. Yeah. And so she hung on like right until I guess she just had enough. And that just speaks to the will to live. I think we have such a strong will to live. But anyway, she passed away, and I was very close with my mom. And so for me, and I know for my sister, my brother as well, it was a very emotional experience. I had lost my father just 2 years before that. I had lost my brother just a few years before that. So it was like bam, 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 3 years. My brother-in-law had died the year before. And so all these loss, and of course, mom, I used to talk to my mom every single day, being so close. That happened on a Monday morning, and it was the 27th of October. And I had stayed in her hospital room that entire weekend, overnight. I slept on a little cot in the corner, and I was holding her hand when she died, and she died that morning. I was in Toronto. Now I live in Ottawa now. I was born and raised in Toronto, but I live in Ottawa now. So I had left there, went to my sister's, had a shower. Danny and I drove back home to Ottawa. I had a speaking engagement that night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And there were a lot of people counting on me. Now, it would have been totally acceptable to say, I'm sorry, I cannot be there. My mother died this morning, and I wasn't even here in this town, and I've just been, up almost 48 hours. But I thought, you know what? I thought about what Bob said, and a professional's at their best regardless. I thought, I have to go. Mm-hmm. These people are expecting me. I feel a sense of obligation. And I had literally thrown out all my notes, and I just spoke from the heart. I talked about how precious life is and how you need to grab a hold of your dream now. You don't know how much time you have. I mean, it was really, obviously from conviction, it comes through. And I believe that, again, for love of the game, he had gone through that experience, but there's experiences that we all go through in our life that may seem challenging. They may seem difficult. They may seem heart-wrenching, yet they strengthen us so much, and we become so much more of a better person. And there's a great gift in all of it that we can have. So we can have those experiences be something that's extraordinary and something that's wonderful. And so, that was probably one of my favorite speaking engagements I ever did. And if I had to go back and do it again, I would do it absolutely again. And for you, what you went through when you were young, getting ready to go to college and looking for scholarships. And then the scouts are looking, and then you get this major major injury, but yet you just focused on what it was that you wanted and overcame.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, that year that I actually had lost 3 family members within 3 months.
Whoa.
I had my shoulder operation in July, and then I lost, so a couple weeks after that, back to back. And so that was a very, very tough year, because that was when, for the first time, life kind of just hit. Up until that, it felt like a breeze, right? Being a kid.
Right.
And then, so yeah, it was I had to really look at myself internally, because a lot of negative thoughts did flood my mind, like,
Yeah, for sure.
right? So but
You rose above it.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, you know, you got focused. I love how we're going to wrap this podcast up, but I love how Bob Proctor also makes a suggestion for increasing your focus or holding an idea with your will. He says to put a dot on the wall or put something on the wall and stare at it, like just stare at it. And of course, we have that in the manifestation toolbox. We created the manifestation target, where you can print out one of those targets and put it on a wall and just focus on what you desire. So I would recommend that everyone do that. You know, during this dialogue that you're hearing in this manifestation podcast, as I'm sharing and Eric sharing with you, you realize that everybody goes through opportunities. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. There's also great learning experiences, not only from our own experiences, but from observing movies, as an example. Sports is another great example. And of course, from just staying focused on what it is that you would love, whether it's something that's short term, whether it's something that is a monumental goal, or whether it's perfect health or increased business or some other kind of dream home. We really want to encourage you to stay focused. And hopefully this dialogue that we've had here with Eric today is going to be something that will shed a light on something for you, perhaps encourage you and inspire you to do more, create more, and be more. And of course, when you do that, you'll have more. Right? Any final comments you want to say, Eric, as we wrap up?
Oh, just thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute blast, and time's flown by. Crazy.
It always does that. You know, it's just like it flies when I'm doing these podcasts. It's amazing. But, you know, I know that everyone's going to get a lot of value out of this. I really appreciate you. I love you sharing your own experience, your own story. And I think it'll give people a really good perspective on things as well. So that's a wrap for this Manifestation podcast. If you love our podcast, we'd love for you to give us a 5-star review and share it with your friends, share it with your following as well. Share it with anyone that you care about, because we would love to help everyone manifest their every desire. So that's a wrap for us, and we wish you a wonderful day and see you in the next episode of the Manifestation Podcast.